She struts into the room. Well, I don't know her, but with a magnifying glance, I just sort of look her over. We have a drink or two, well, maybe three.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of ROX TV, one of our new series of special features on some of the world's most iconic rock bands and rock albums. We start with one of the most iconic of them all, Alice Cooper's Killer. John Lydon called this the world's best punk album. Not an album that you would class as punk, perhaps, but with its raw rock ideology and production style, you can see why he called it this. We're going to take you back 50 years to the release of this album. At only 37 minutes, it wasn't the longest album, but it was end-to-end classic American garage rock, killer rock, punk, whatever you want to call it. End-to-end 37 minutes of classic Alice Cooper. So let's go back. Let's go back in the time machine 50 years to the release of Killer by Alice Cooper. It's long been regarded as one of the crucial albums in Alice Cooper's canon. And by Alice Cooper, I do mean Alice Cooper the band, as well as Alice Cooper the solo artist. Let's go back to 1971, November. Flower Power was gone. The Summer of Love was gone. The hangover had begun. Peace and love was not exactly in everybody's mind. Vietnam was ringing in people's ears, and the world was starting to see things as it really is. They needed rock to reflect their anger, their disappointment, and their feelings regarding the world that they see around them. In 1971, rock was riding high in the world, and it was constantly evolving in a multitude of directions, from proto-punk to progressive rock, the either end of the spectrum, you could say. Glam rock was on top of the pops, as fans adored the likes of Mark Bolan and David Bowie. This safe, well, mostly safe apart from Gary Glitter, poppy rock was great, but for a band like Alice Cooper, this was just all too safe, and not at all the kind of music they wanted to play. Already, the band had a reputation for extremes and off-the-wall musical excursions and stage shows. Alice Cooper were forming during the early 70s into a band with incredible potential and an edgy sound that people were finding both shocking and cool. In their early days, the band couldn't make any real headway in the music world. Their shows and early music was just too left field, too weird. It was dark and it was aggressive for an America that was still recovering from the 1960s drug haze. By 1970, however, Alice Cooper's brand of shock rock was getting lots of favourable attention from fans and the music press. With the success of the 1970 album Easy Action, the band were keen to forge ahead, and their record label, Warner Brothers, were more than happy to give them the creative freedom they needed to create Love It to Death, released in March of 1971. The single from that album was the immortal I'm 18, which skyrocketed the charts, reaching number 21 in the US. Their music was evolving and becoming better constructed and recorded. This was matched by more and more extravagant and stunning live shows. Flushed with the success of Love It to Death, the band rushed back into the studio to put out another album that same year. That album was called Killer, released only 8 months after Love It to Death. This was recorded by the Alice Cooper Band. Not Alice Cooper solo, that was to come later on in his career. This was the Alice Cooper Band, which consisted of Alice Cooper, Vincent Furnier was his real name, Glenn Buxton on lead guitar, Michael Bruce on rhythm guitar, Dennis Dunaway on bass, and Neal Smith on drums. I'll be talking to Neal Smith much later on in this documentary, and you can hear his own views on the album and the Alice Cooper Band. But for now, let's go back to Killer. With elements taken from Love It to Death and a raft of new musical and lyrical ideas, Killer would become the new milestone for Alice Cooper, reaching number 21 in the Billboard album charts and spawning 2 hit singles this time, Under My Wheels, which reached number 59 in the US, and Be My Lover, which reached 49. Which, though not as high-reaching as 18, they still proved to be very popular amongst fans, and they were getting plenty of airplay, despite their rather suspect lyrical content. As was the norm back then, due to the limitations of vinyl, the album was, as I say, short at only 37.8 minutes long, and there was only 8 songs on offer, so each one had to count. This was the time before fillers. The band were a tight group of musicians who shared a common vision and a sense of great musicality. Nothing they did or released was by accident. Everything was managed to create an image of a dark, dangerous band. Killer took this to whole new heights with songs like Halo of Flies and Dead Babies. The album was so heavy for its time, so heavy and raw in fact, that John Lydon, as I say, referred to this as the number 1 punk album of all time. Bob Ezrin's was the solo producer on this album, the first one he did for Alice Cooper, and his production is spot on. He maintains their dark, raw energy, but also kept their looseness, their jamming sensibilities, and their emotions were all there for people to see and hear. The album was recorded at RCA Studios in Chicago and was released initially on vinyl LP and good old 8-track, for those out there who remember what 8-track was. The Octopus was the name often referred to for the drummer, Neal Smith. If you've ever watched a video of him drumming, you'll know why he was often called the Octopus. The guy looked as if he got 8 arms. His mesmerising drumming powers the entire album, forming an outstandingly tight rhythm section with bassist Dennis Dunaway. Seeing him live was a treat for the ears and the eyes, with his long flowing blonde hair and his arms going around like somebody crazy. 2 guitarists were also unusual back then. Alice Cooper had 2 guitarists. Glenn Buxton, who sadly passed away in 1997, and Michael Bruce. A true powerhouse in any rock band. Of course, the man at the front and main lyricist, Alice Cooper, is amazing on Killer. Only he could pull off such songs with an edgy realism and snarl. Killer is also distinct in that every song from the album has been performed at least once live. And the snake, the one on the sleeve, that was Neal's pet snake. The album has been re-released several times, of course, on CD and cassette. The CD's compression and sterile nature does slightly lessen the raw aggression and power of the original vinyl release. The stereo sound field is also less noticeable, as the vinyl changes from wide and loose to at times claustrophobic and intense in sound. If you can, hear this album on vinyl, especially with headphones. It is awesome. By now, the 5-piece were stars. The album gave them even more freedom to go on to release albums like School's Out, a much maligned album and a little bit mixed up at times according to critics, and then the awesome $1 Billion Babies, followed on by the slightly more commercial Muscle of Love, which would sadly mark the end of Alice Cooper, the band. Alice Cooper went solo after that, and his bandmates formed their own band, $1 Billion Babies, and released a single album, unfortunately, called Battle Axe. They had already written songs for the next Alice Cooper album, so naturally they were disappointed that they weren't involved in the next Alice Cooper album, but that didn't deter them from putting the music out anyway, and I applaud that. Jump forward to 2021 now, and Killer is 50 years old. Having been around for so many years, it has remained a firm favourite amongst rock fans. The music has inspired many bands to create their own music, and Alice Cooper himself still plunders the album for songs to play live to this day. To celebrate the album and its influence on rock bands today, a new covers album has been recorded. UK independent record label Pale Wizard Records have released Killer 50 years later on CD with bonus tracks, digital and vinyl. Funded initially as a Kickstarter campaign, the album is a celebration and homage to Killer. All of the 8 original songs are performed by 8 different bands: Green Lung, The Grand Mal, Sergeant Thunderhoof, Ritual King, 1968, Trippy Wicked and the Cosmic Children of the Night, MOS Generator, Admiral Sir Cloudsy Shovel, and then we have 4 bonus tracks of Alice Cooper songs that were not obviously on the album itself, but are equally iconic in their own right, including 18, $1 Billion Babies, Muscle Love and Sick Things. With a wide range of talent on offer, each with their own take on the classic songs, the album is a fascinating and a fitting tribute to the original. The songs haven't been butchered but treated with respect, which is good to hear. The bands have added their own sound and feel to the songs, but not messed around with the original songs too much. This could so easily have been a disaster. We're happy to say, however, this isn't the case. Each song is well done, with only Ritual King's version of Desperado letting things down a little. It doesn't quite work somehow. It loses the feel and emotion of the original, sadly. We're not keen on a Luna's cover of I'm 18 either, but it's a bonus track, so we'll forgive that. The printed CD and vinyl is also a nice touch, looking very similar to the original Warner Brothers CD and vinyl covers. On the whole, we like it. And coming from us, that's pretty good. On now to an exclusive interview with original Alice Cooper drummer Neal Smith, interspersed with some classic photos and archive footage of the band at their rawest and live best. Go and check out the Alice Cooper original album Killer if you haven't got it, why not? And go and check out this brand new covers album, Killer 50 Years Later. Thank you for watching. Keep watching for the interview and some seriously great rock from Alice Cooper.
Unser letzter Fehlfrage. Guten Abend.
It is. I'm recording this for the show. Is that okay with you, Neal?
That's cool.
Okay, man. As you say, it has been 50 years since what is, I mean, it's been referred to as one of the all-time classics, which I'm inclined to agree. Killer is an amazing album. I mean, Johnny Rotten even called it the best punk album he's ever heard. I wouldn't go. Do you think that? I mean, have you heard that? And what do you think? I mean, would you class it as punk?
I just considered I never had a label for us. So what anybody, it's like a piece of art. Somebody can criticize it and say it reminds them of something, and someone else completely gets a different idea. So I'm glad that it gave enough thought-provoking to what people thought about it. I still tend to think that we were shock rock to a point, glam rock, and it really was what we developed was the shock rock. Because there was never, and I mean, Sgt. Pepper was about 1 million miles away from the Killer album, and so I think we sort of blazed our own trail, and that was the forefront of what we were doing right at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you were certainly at that kind of cutting edge as well, weren't you? I mean, there was the New York Dolls and people like that, which sort of come along more or less a little later on. But as you say, without Alice Cooper Band, and I will stress Alice Cooper Band, not Alice Cooper himself. But
well, and that's an important part of it too, is that it was a group, and I think, I mean, the true fans know that.
Yeah.
And I still get a little upset when I see our original albums, you know, I mean, yes, Alice was on them. He was part of the band, but they were not solo albums. And I would stress that more than anything else. It's like, you know, Peter Frampton, you know, he went solo, and then Alice, you know, went solo. We can talk about that later, but I really stress the importance of what the band did, because it was a democracy. We each owned it 20%, all 5 members, and that's a very, very important fact. Everybody was creating. There was no leader. We were all very creative people, all out of art school, and we all had the same direction and the same goals in mind, which was fantastic.
And it was released, I mean, 6 months after Love It to Death. Obviously that got the big hit single 18 on it. Was the band under a lot of pressure at the time like from Warner Brothers saying, oh, well, you need a follow-up album, you need it fast, how soon can we have the sequel sort of thing? Was the band under pressure?
No, we never, excuse me a second.
That's okay.
I never felt pressure ever in that band. We had recorded the first 2 albums with Frank Zappa, and we thought they were great albums.
Mm-hmm.
And our writing style changed individually and as a band. Mike and Dennis and I were the main writers of the songs, and Alice would write, but his main job was the lyrics. He's a great lyricist, and So the songs were just flowing, and people still ask to this day, so where were the extra songs we never had extra songs. There were no bonus tracks.
No.
Every song that went on there was a song that was capable of being on a gold album or a platinum album. There were no filler. We never ever felt we had filler songs because they were so damn good. So we were lucky and happy about that. But we were just pouring them out, and they wanted us to go in the studio. We'll go in the studio. We have plenty of material. And Bob Ezra by that time was working very closely with us as almost a sixth member of the band. He actually did some shows back in '71 with us, came on stage and played keyboard. So it was a very creative time for us. We had been, a lot of people, it's like the old adage, that overnight sensation. Well, the overnight sensation, we were lucky to get a third album to have a chance with Love It to Death. And then by that time, that opened the doors for us with Warner Brothers to keep recording more albums. So we'll record as many as they wanted to put out. And there was no pressure on us. We were just writing, and we wanted to keep the ball rolling.
Fair play. And as you say, as long as you weren't under any creative pressure, do you feel, when you've just been talking about the idea of bonus tracks and all this sort of thing these days, when we had the vinyl albums, it got to get it, you got like 44 maybe top minutes to really get your point across on an album. Do you feel that these days, when there could be 60-minute albums, 70-minute albums, that they take far too long to say what they want to say? Or do you wish that back then you've got a 60-minute album and then you could have put more songs on?
Well, I think that the era that you live in is how you create. Right now, my Neal Smith albums have anything from 10 to 12 songs on them, and sometimes they've had 13. So it's the media too. It's the vinyl was a little limited, and the shorter the album, the better it would sound. You start working with the grooves, and now with digital, you could on a disc or downloading, you have unlimited space to put songs. So I don't think it's really thought out. I don't think about how many songs I put on an album these days. The ones that are in my head have to come out. And in those days with the group, we put the songs together with Bob Ezrin, and I'm still sort of surprised. Love It to Death had 9 songs, and Killer had 8 songs on it. So, and I know that there were more monumental sort of songs like Killer and what was the other? One
that you actually wrote.
What's that?
Halo of Flies. I mean, what a statement.
Well, that song was about a combination of different songs that we were writing at the time, and we just took all these bits and pieces and put them together. And you can hear that when you listen to the song. And I think one of the main things that I am always asking, love to stress about the Killer album, that after Pretty for You, Easy Action, Love It to Death, and on our stage show getting so much of the publicity and the news, it was almost like it was sort of a grudge for us that nobody was really considering how good musicians we were. Michael Bruce was a great rhythm guitar player, writing great music. Dennis is an amazing bass player. I have my moments as a percussionist, and was open to be totally creative and on all the albums. And Alice was doing his thing, and lyrically great music. And Glenn would come up with really original ideas. I mean, the School's Out intro lick is one of the main signature guitar licks in any song in rock and roll history back in the day. So there was a bit of a grudge that we wanted to put a piece of music together to stop all this bullshit about that we weren't good musicians. And Halo of Flies did that, and I know many parts of the world it's still a song that's played all the time, and we were very happy. It's an amazing song. I mean, it's one of the most playing that song when we do it on stage. Well, we did it on stage. Dennis Dunaway and myself had a band with Joe Bouchard in the early 2000s called Bouchard, Dunaway, and Smith, and we took on a very large challenge to do Halo of Flies with a trio, and we did it, and we took the key part. And it's amazing how much of that song is bass and drums, but with the melodies, and Joe Bouchard picked all the melodies and played it on guitar. And it was exciting as a 3-piece as it was, with 5 pieces with a full band. So that was another huge hurdle that we went over and accomplished with the Killer album. And of course, it was our first platinum album as well.
Deservedly so. It's also markedly the darkest album I think that the Alice Cooper band put out. But it's got these light moments. I mean, like Desperado is a ballad, which it kind of seems at first out of place, but when you listen to it in the context of the whole album, it fits somehow. Do you feel that there was were you as a band consciously needing to go into a darker sound, or did you feel that because of the reputation you guys have got for your stage show, you've got to get darker, you've got to become heavier, you've got to be more gruesome? Or was that just something that was coming out of you?
Well, that's a great question, Carrie. And I always go back to the week, the day in 1967 when we came up with the name Alice Cooper for the name of the band. It was a blank slate. Alice Cooper could have been everything from a folk singer to what we became. And it was up, and we were all very creative. And once that piece of art was being created, every brushstroke on the canvas, it became clearer and clearer and clearer. But we were using melody as our, and music as our art form. And we were creating it all the time. And once we realized that we were creating something new and it was different and it was getting success, that we just dove into it head first. And that's how, and that's in the evolution from Love It to Death to Killer was just finding out who we really were, and that we had an audience, even more importantly, that we had a huge audience for it. So I think that, again, it wasn't thought out. We would just start writing in that vein, and the music, and we wanted to be, there was no such term as heavy metal back then. We just called it kill rock from the Detroit area, with the Stooges and the MC5 and all the heavy bands from Detroit in the late 60s, early 70s. So we were right in the middle of all of that really heavy music. And I had asked someone when we lived there in the early 70s, 71 time period in Detroit, because there were a lot of really strong heavy bands, MC5, Amboy Dukes with Ted Nugent, like I said, the Stooges. So I'd asked someone one time, why they liked us, why we were becoming, more popular than a lot of those bands. And they said, you guys do everything that they do, but so much more. And I think it was the so much more is what we were always interested in, to be, we were being right in the middle of it in the Detroit, heavy rock era of the late 60s. And that's where we ended up, living, and it was inspiring us. That's who we were. And they just, we had a little bit of glamour and glitz on it, but we were right in the middle of it, and we were living, because that album was recorded while we were living in Michigan. That's before we moved to Connecticut. So I think it's all of those things. We didn't say let's get dark. That was our natural progression. We just knew that we had an audience for it. And when you record something, Carrie, you never, ever know if it's going to work with the fans, if it's going to be a hit or whatever. All we can do is be ourselves and have Bob Ezrin produce that to the best of his ability. And thank God it all worked out great. And I still can't believe 50 years later, people, love the music, and it's pretty cool for us.
Absolutely. It is still one of the, it is classed as one of the greatest pieces of rock that's ever been released. So, but you really got a dark and heavy during Killer. Yeah. What happened with Schools Out? I mean, you had a great single off Schools Out, the title track, obviously. That was a little more disjointed. Were you under pressure then from Warner Brothers to kind of, coolie guys, you're getting a bit too dark for us?
Well, let me put it this way. We never, ever, we had total control over our music. Nobody ever fucking told us what to do, ever. And so we didn't talk to Warner. We went there to pick our gold and platinum albums up. That's what we did. That's the only link we had between them. It was all us. And Shep was there as our manager, and Joe Greenberg to do all the publicity, all the press work, and just get our band's name out there. Bob Ezrin was there to put albums together for us. And I think what happened with Schools Out is that we're just in a bubble. And we know Love It to Death was a hit. It was our first gold album, and I'm 18 was a great single. And Caught in a Dream was another great song on the album. And Under My Wheels was a great single on Killer, but it became more of a stage show phenomenon than it didn't go up the charts as far as I'm 18 did. So we needed a song to blow the lid off of what Alice Cooper was. After Schools Out, we never opened for anybody ever again. I never opened for another band in my life. And so the band didn't. So that was our goal. And the magic of Bob Ezrin working with us is that he could keep the dark side of Alice Cooper, which was the Dead Babies and Killer, Black Juju, keep all those dark songs, I Love the Dead, but we could still make hit records. And that's the magic, because how in the world can a band like Alice Cooper make hit records? And so we put Schools Out together, because at that time, that was off the success of Love It to Death and Killer. But we consciously thought of a song and a concept that was still 100% Alice Cooper, because it was inspired by Clockwork Orange and West Side Story. And that was just punk gangs that were, featured in both movies and stories. So that was still, it was still dark, but it wasn't as dark as like Killer. And I think, again, as we're putting the brushstrokes on the painting of what Alice Cooper was all about, there were many different colors. And Schools Out certainly was a little bit still in the same theme and concept, but now we were able to add a little more dimension to it. And I think Schools Out is cool an album as Killer, but it just shows maybe a little more musical theatrics than Killer did. I could be wrong. That's that was all part of it.
You mentioned when I emailed you about doing this interview, you mentioned about the snake, and you said, "Oh, by the way, the snake was mine."
Yeah,
how's the snake?
Kachina was my pet snake. I always, obviously when we're on the road and we're traveling, you can't take a dog or a cat or whatever animal you have for the most part. I guess these days a lot of people do that, but we we had played, I think after we'd start recording, it was either late 70, early 71, we played down in Florida at a venue, I believe it was Pirates World, and somebody threw a snake up on stage. And because I liked reptiles and I liked all kinds of animals, but couldn't have one, I sort of adopted the snake that was thrown on stage, and she became my pet. So when we lived in Michigan, I had her, took care of her. We lived on a farm, so I would go out and shoot critters and feed her that way. And because we didn't have a lot of money back then, even Love It to Death and to Kill Her, you know, we had hit albums, but it takes a while for the money to come in, and for the price that we get played doing shows to go up and up and up. So we weren't quite there yet. So I had a gun, and I went out and I'd shoot animals for her, you know, birds and mice and rats and that sort of thing. So I really took good care of her, and you know, it was one of the things we had talked about early on with the Killer album. You know, what the theme was going to be, and it just evolved that, you know, we took a photo session with Kachina, was her name, and that's based on our it's an American, Native American Indian name that's for religious dolls and symbolic dolls that they have. And I thought it was apropos because we're from the Southwest in Arizona. And so Kachina became her name, and took a photo session, and there must have been over 100 pictures taken, and there was only one that had her tongue sticking out, and that was it. And that was it. The minute I saw that, I go, that's the album cover right there. And then Dennis had written in left hand, like a psycho person, Alice Cooper Killer, and that's how the concept of the album happened. So unfortunately, we did lose her on the Schools Out tour, but she was with us quite a while, and even to this day, Rolling Stone magazine had the top 10 theatrical props in rock and roll history, and Kachina was #1. So that's pretty cool, and she was a great pet snake. She only bit me one time, so I'm happy about that. Trust me, I'm happy about that. But
I mean, Alice has certainly had his mileage out of the whole thing as well. I mean, the number of live tours when he's brought a snake out.
Well, yeah, no, she became a. I mean, was it? I think it was. Is It My Body on Love It to Death, and you know, because it was like a stripper song. You know, I mean, they had that kind of element to it, and so yeah, I had her with us. I had her with me all the time on tour. So, you know, it's like everybody else. If you want to eat, you've got to work. So she went on stage with Alice and became an icon and symbolic. And still to this day, you know, a snake and Alice Cooper is like the name of Alice Cooper, the band, and the solo artist is right there. It's part of the whole image of Alice Cooper.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only live recording, official live album recording that was done of the Alice Cooper Band was a CD that was called Live at the Whiskey A Go Go on Edsel Records. It was released in 1992, a long time after its original recording in '69. Were you aware of that release?
Oh, no, I know. Yeah, it was recorded at the Whiskey, and that was when we were doing, I think, a lot of the songs from Prettiest Few and Easy Action.
It was the very early stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and then the only other recordings were recordings that we did for the Good to See You Again Alice Cooper movie, and that was a bonus disc on a re-release of the $1 Billion Baby album, because that's majority of the songs were $1 Billion Babies. That was released either the late 90s or early 2000s. So that was way after the fact as well. But we just, we just never ever thought about it. You know, we thought about it. Frank Zappa set the one up at the Whiskey, so we really didn't have anything to do with it. That was a mobile unit that was very popular back then. And then we recorded in Dallas and Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, I believe, on a mobile multi-track studio that was in Texas for the Good to See You Again, Alice Cooper recordings. So that was one thing we just, you know, for one reason or another, never happened that often for us. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but it's sort of, you know, I hate the term, it is what it is, but it was. You just, you know, we were concentrating on live shows and doing as many as we could. And if you think about it, from the day I joined the band, which is in the fall of 1967, when it was still the Naz, you know, every single day we were either playing, rehearsing, or recording. And till the band broke up, we didn't have days. We didn't take days off. We were doing what we wanted to do. We had plenty of traveling, so nobody wanted to go anywhere for vacation. So we were doing plenty of traveling, and we just kept busy that way. But I wish we would have done more live recording, but we didn't. But you know, there's always the future. Who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to say that you regularly, well, fairly regularly, still work with Alice, don't you? You've done, well, you was on Welcome to My Nightmare, for example, the sequel to Welcome to My Nightmare. So, you know, there's obviously no hard feelings, because I was going to broach the subject of how come the Alice Cooper Band stopped being the Alice Cooper Band and became Alice Cooper. Well, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it many times. A lot of things that you hear are not even close to true. But what is true, we took a year off after the movie. That's when the movie was released, the Greatest Hits album was released. We took a year off because Michael Bruce wanted to do a solo album. And so the fact that we always recorded, we had some time off. I recorded the album with Dennis Dunaway's help, Platinum God. And then Alice did Welcome to My Nightmare. Well, Alice found success with Welcome to My Nightmare. We were going to take the year off to do that and tour if you wanted to, if you could. And then we would get back together and put another album together. That's when Michael, Bruce, and Dennis Dunaway and myself got together and wrote the songs that would become the Battle Axe album with the band $1 Billion Babies. But that was for Alice Cooper. And Warner Brothers wasn't happy there wasn't an album, because Alice did his solo album on Atlantic Records. And so we got together and did that at my house in Greenwich, Connecticut. And and Alice didn't show up. So he had found success on his own, and he kept going. So we were ready to go. And we all owned the name equally. And so there was some, you know, there were some interesting things that happened at that period of time. The band, there was never a discrepancy of what we were doing. I mean, if you look at what the Battle Axe album was with $1 Billion Baby Band with Michael and Dennis and I, we spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on a theatrical show. It was probably more theatrical than anything that the original band had ever done. So if you ever hear anybody say that we weren't interested in doing theatrics or the clothes, that's a bunch of bullshit. We put our money. You have a pussycat back there.
Yeah,
we have money where we have
money. She likes to get in on the act.
Yeah, looks like an album cover to me. But the Black Cat, I love it. But so the only thing I knew in that time period that I wasn't going to get in a lawsuit with my four best friends. That was never going to happen. We had gone from nothing, from total obscurity, to becoming a household name in many countries across the world. And so it wasn't going to end up like one of these crazy things. So we all said, okay, we're going to stop the top of our career. I'd rather do that than end up, playing at bars with a guillotine. when we're like in our 40s. So it was all amicable. We figured out a way to make it work, and we stayed friends. We had to. I mean, still to this day, Mike and Dennis and Alice and I are my best friends. And that's why when the Hall of Fame happened in 2010 and we were inducted in 2011, that we were not going to be like Kiss or other bands where there was so much animosity between the members of the band that they'll get together, but they will never play. I mean, we loved to play. We were, nobody was shy about getting on stage, and we were like 5 show-offs. We loved it. We still do to this day, and till the day we die, we'll all be performing it if our health we're able to do it. So, it was a tough time for us. Of course, we all wanted to be out there, and I'm just disappointed for the fans that there wasn't more Alice Cooper Group music. That there would have been plenty, believe me, and it wouldn't have been the same as what Alice did solo because he's writing with different musicians, and it wasn't Dennis, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't Michael. So that's why I'm so happy that we have been able to put songs on the Welcome to My Nightmare album, the sequel, Paranormal, Detroit Stories, and hopefully we'll continue that in the future.
Do you need to get that?
Nope, no way.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's talk about Neal now, though. We've talked about Alice Cooper Band and Alice Cooper and Killer. Let's talk about Neal, the drummer. Just like that, because of this anniversary coming up, I've been watching quite a lot of the old footage. Yeah. And I have to say, your drumming style fascinates me. Absolutely. Were you very influenced by sort of jazz drummers? Because the way you have your cymbals kind of ride really high to make you reach for them a lot. Was it so that you got that very dramatic swing?
Well, there's a lot to this story. I started playing when I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. And it wasn't long after that I became 6'3". And I don't know what that is metrically, but, and I have my arm span is about 7 feet. So I had a height advantage over most drummers. And I just wanted, for 2 reasons, I wanted to have the cymbals high so they didn't hide my face, first of all. And it gave me a lot of theatrical movements on stage. And I still do that to this day. But my formal training, I spent 2 years in public school learning snare drum and private lessons at when I lived in Akron, Ohio, at the University of Akron in their music conservatory. And so I also was a big fan of Alex Duntart, who was the pipe and drummer champion from the British Isles all through the 50s and 60s. And that's why I have so many, like even Killer with the drum roll. It's so military. Everything with pipe and drums is very military and precise. And so that, between being a rudimental drummer, and I learned all the rudiments and read music and everything. I can't do it anymore. I can't read music. And actually, I believe it was the Killer I Love to Death. I almost came up with a new rudiment of my own, which had never been done before, which I call it just a drop stick. You just drop the stick on the drum, and it's like a Doppler effect. It just gets quieter as it slows down. And I use that on one of the songs. But and then I'm a big show off on stage. I mean, I really like to emphasize what I'm doing. And I had the leg, and I wanted the biggest drum set in the world. So Keith Moon definitely influenced the double bass drums, but then I just started going from there because I added till I ended up with a 21 drum kit. That was the last one that I had with Premier out of the UK. I had Slingerland before that, and I love the Slingerland drums. I went from 18 to 20 with Slingerland, and then 21 with the Premier. So yeah, it was an evolution. And again, I went, because people talk about, you know, my drum parts and everything. It's like everybody in the band. We wrote every single part ourselves. You know, Bob may have helped with some melody lines on songs or what have you, arrangements, but we were able to. Nobody said, Neal, we'll play this. They would suggest things which are great ideas, and I would love to do that. Have a direction, but the final analysis, it was what we chose. It would work on the music. And Billion Dollar Babies, of course, is a great. I mean, that's a rudiment song. There's a flange, right? You do the song. Killer. You Drive Me Nervous. Those are flams all the way through that song, and you have to look that up if you're not a drummer. But but I wanted to have the longest hair. I wanted to look flashy on stage, and it goes back to the triple crown of success in rock and roll, as far as I'm concerned. First one is master your instrument. The second one is to write your own music. And the third one is to be a great showman. If you can put those three things together, every superstar that you can think of has those three elements. And it's not a secret, but, and I never thought about that, you know, as I went through my career, and still, but when you boil it down, that's what pretty much it comes to.
And you were, and you still are very much that showman. As I say, watching you drum is mesmerizing. I mean, they go on about some drummers being like an octopus on stage. You were like this long blonde octopus.
I've been called the octopus many times.
I'm not surprised.
And I take it as a compliment. And as a matter of fact,
it should be.
My first Killsmith album, Sexual Savior, I have a picture in there, and I have 3 models that did photos with me. And I have a picture where I'm in a black shirt, and they all have black shirts on, and they're standing, and we all have red fingernail polish on. And they're standing behind me, and there's 8 arms holding 8 drumsticks. And it was actually something I had always wanted to do, and I put it on there for one of the songs. So that's just I don't see it, but I guess enough people had you know, seen me play that name sort of stuck over the years. But I still love to play, and I've had great ideas for other drum sets. Believe me, over the years it would have gone crazy. And once we had plenty of money, but we were about ready to become very wealthy when the band broke up. And over the years, you know, the people still buy the music still sells, and that's great. I retired about 5 years ago, and no problem. I travel a lot, and it gives me the time to do the Killsmith project, like we're talking. And I wrote back then, and I continue to write, and basically write in real heavy rock, heavy metal. But my new Killsmith that I'm working on right now is called Killsmith Goes West, and it has a little outlaw renegade feel of some very heavy country rock in it. So it's a little bit different, but again, it's what flows out of you as a musician and a songwriter. 'Cause I play guitar and keyboard also, but I love the drums.
That's great. I was going to ask you what you're up to these days. I mean, that sounds like something I definitely want to hear. You must share it across to us, message me or email me or something when you've got some of these songs down.
If you go to YouTube, Neal Smith, Killsmith, there's a lot of my songs on.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out, because as I said, somebody like you, your talent, whatever you do is going to be good. Sorry, I mean, as I say, I emailed you because there is a cover album coming out towards the end of the month on the anniversary of Killer itself. It's called 50 Years Later. It's on Pale Wizard Records. Do you know anything? Have you heard? Did they ask you?
Carrie, I've heard about that, but I have not been in the loop on its re-release. but I'm looking forward to it. Anything that's ever been released officially, I've gotten copies of it over the years, and when we did the box sets, I was involved in those.
That's good.
But when there's a special release, and I know that in Asia there were some special mixes that were released. Japan, I get all those copies as well. So I'm sure I'll get a copy of this, and I'm very curious to see. Is it more than just the Killer album from what you've seen, or?
Yeah, curiously, it's a cross section of bands. I mean, there's a couple of punk bands doing a couple of songs, but, you know, their sort of take on songs like Halo of Flies and Desperado.
Like a tribute. So
it's a tribute album. Yeah,
they probably fucked our songs up for a tribute. I'm only kidding.
Some are reasonable covers.
Yeah, well, I mean,
others.
There's, I got to tell you, a song like Halo of Flies we're talking about before is not easy to play. Alice has never had a drummer that's really played the song correctly. And you mentioned a while ago about a swing. I was part of my music, and Ginger Baker was. It really came to mind when he gave some interviews one time, and they talked to him about swing. To me, that's the biggest element of what a drummer can do, to get not only just the beat, but I want to be more than a human metronome. I want the music to flow. And Halo of Flies certainly had it. And if you don't have that swing in Halo of Flies, it's going to sound very choppy. And I've only ever heard Michael Bruce played with some musicians when he was in the UK back in the early 2000s for a Sick Things show that they had over there, reunion. And Dennis and Bouchard, Dunaway and Smith, we were over there, and Michael was there. And the drummer that played with Michael, it's from the UK, and unfortunately I don't know his name. He played Halo of Flies great, the best version I ever heard of it. So I'm very appreciative of people that love our music enough to do tributes to it. There's been some cool versions, some of them that are totally off the wall. I had a song actually on Love It to Death called Hallowed Be My Name, and a band out of the Midwest in the US called Thrill Kill Cult. That was a big band back in the 90s and the 2000s. They did an amazing rendition of Halo of Flies, which I think if somebody's going to do a rendition of a song, it's got to be as good or better than the original. And this was totally different, but I loved it. It came out really, really cool.
Fantastic.
I'm looking forward to it.
Before you go, and thank you so much for the interview and taking so much of your time up. I do appreciate it. Before you go, is there anything you'd like to say to your, let's face it, millions, if not billions of fans out there?
Well, it's like I said at the Hall of Fame. I'm still amazed and get choked up that this many years later that people love what we did when people told us, what the fuck are you doing? And you're never going to do anything, and you're never going to make it. And believe me, we found enough people that were as crazy as us to enjoy what we're doing and help us get on stage and do our thing, man. And believe me, as much as they love us, I love them even more.
Thank you so much, Neal. It's been a total pleasure, and I have to say, a complete honor speaking to one of ROX's legendary drummers. Thank you, Neal, and wish you the very best of luck for the future.
I appreciate the opportunity, and
bye-bye. Bye-bye. You keep well.
You too.
Hi, this is Mark from Sergeant Thunderhoof. We've been asked by ROX Network to talk about our recent contribution to the Pale Wizards 50 Years Later release of Alice Cooper's Killer album, which is a phenomenal album. We're really chuffed to be asked. Our singer, Dan, is a massive fan of Alice Cooper and has indoctrinated most of us into the vast back catalogue. But obviously, Killer stands out as realistically a seminal album. Shaped a lot of rock to come, as much you might say as maybe Black Sabbath with their first album. We, Sergeant Thunderhoof, are a sort of stoner, psychedelic prog band, hard rock. Is that bad to say anymore? And we do tend to favour quite long songs. So the track that sort of stood out to us was Halo of Flies. We did leave it a little while before we chose our track, and all of the other big hitters had been sort of taking the punchy 3-minute pop songs or pop rock songs. So we had Halo of Flies, which is 8 or 9 minutes long, so sort of within our territory. And yeah, it was a real challenge. So I play guitar in Sergeant Thunderhoof. We are guitar, drums, and a bass, and a singer. And the Alice Cooper band at the time were just like off the wall musicians. They're phenomenal, you know, up there with like Frank Zappa, who was around at the time as well, with that sort of really sort of avant-garde take and musical genius. So it was a bit of a challenge. We sort of all went away and learnt it in our component parts, sort of came together, and then made suggestions just to make it a little bit more us whilst retaining some semblance of truthfulness to the original genius that is Halo of Flies. The guitar parts for me, the Alice Cooper band had 2 guitarists at the time. On the album, I think there's, with harmonies and various other bits and pieces, at least between 4 and 6 guitar parts. So I had to sort of learn both. Which is it was a challenge. Jim and Daz, our bass and drummer, basically they had no less a job, again, because the musicians were phenomenal. Dan, our singer, again, huge fan of Alice Cooper. He relished the challenge, and he's a phenomenal vocalist, but don't tell him that. It was recorded and produced at Stage 2 Studios in Bath, which the producer engineer Josh Gallup is just phenomenal. So we've done quite a few recordings with him, and I believe he has either mixed or mastered or done something for the back end of this with all the other artists who are on this release. So it's phenomenal to be on this release with the likes of Green Lung, Sound of Origin, Luna. Crikey, I'm really terrible with band names and even song names. I've got to be reminded what time of day it is because I'm partially geriatric. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. But yeah, this is Mark from Sergeant Thunderhoof signing out. Cheers, bye.
Totally fine, thank you. Do you mind if I just record this for the feature we're going to be doing? That's awesome. Great. Thank you, Daniel. So I mean, what put this idea into the record label's head, or was it the bands that approached you?
It's during lockdown last year, and I was just bored and playing records with my kids because we tried to turn the TV off because it's all negative and all this kind of stuff. So I was just playing lots of records, and my eldest Louis, who's 6, he was asking about Alice Cooper because I was playing a lot of Alice Cooper, and he was asking how old he was, and I was saying, "Oh God, he must be in his late 70s now." And the album, it struck me that the album we listened to was turning 50 years old. So I just assumed that, because I'm a big fan, I was like, there must be some kind of anniversary, I don't know, doing some big kind of release for it. And I was looking on the internet, I couldn't find anything. I was thinking, that's a shame. And then I was thinking, well, I know a lot of bands. I reckon I could find a few bands to maybe cover a couple of the songs, just for a laugh, really. But it kind of snowballed once I spoke to my our friend Tony Reed, who lives in the US. he was like, oh yeah, I love that album. I'd love to do a song and I'll master it and all this. And so it quickly turned into let's just redo the whole thing, get all our friends involved. And luckily it seems that people kind of got on board with the idea.
And it is brilliant. I've got to say we've had it on here, and we were very surprised, I have to say, because sometimes when these cover albums come along, these tribute albums, they suck, don't they? Metallica, Black. But you know, they.
Some of them, I think some of them, they sound insincere sometimes, don't they? So
absolutely.
I think some of them are coming from purely a financial kind of incentive, and that's really not what we were all about. We just wanted to kind of lovingly pay tribute to it, you know.
Yeah, particularly like the way the album artwork is. You know, you've kept that Alice Cooper 1970s style, even going as far as the CD itself is printed very much like the original Warner Brothers label.
Yeah, nice. that was my partner Sarah. She does all the artwork, and she was very keen to kind of pay homage to the original. So there's lots of stuff in both the CD and the actual vinyl, which kind of, I think a lot of old school fans will go, that's a nice little kind of nod, you know. So yeah, we're really, really happy with that.
Yeah, it was. So, I mean, there's quite a broad selection of bands on here, isn't there? There's everything from what I would call punk, which doesn't surprise me because of it's been, you know, Killer's been called by as the ultimate punk album, which endlessly surprises Alice Cooper band members. But you know, so it's now surprised that punk bands do call on that album, I suppose. But there is a very wide selection of musical styles and takes on the original classics, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the band Sergeant Thunderhoof, and we kind of get lumped into the stoner rock doom category. Although I probably would say we're more like a heavy rock band with kind of classic influences. But so we've played a lot of these shows with most of the bands on this record we've actually played with. And yeah, you're right. It's kind of, I mean, I always remember John Lydon talking about this album, saying it's the best rock album ever. And you know, he sounded quite sincere when he said it, you know. So it was a real delight doing the album, because pretty much most of the people who were our first choices said yes. It didn't take much convincing to get them on the record.
Which would you say is your favourite song on there?
There's a couple. I really like what the Grand Mal have done with Be My Lover, because I just think it suits them, because their singer's got a real swagger. And I think he really gets the kind of Detroit kind of garage rock thing that's going on with that original Alice Cooper band. So I really love what they've done to that song. I love what Admiral Sir Cloudesley Shovel have done with the final track, Killer, because they were very much influenced by the very first two Alice Cooper albums, which were kind of like psych rock, kind of Frank Zappa style, very weird, not very successful, but kind of cult-like albums. And what I find interesting about their take of the song Killer is it sounds like it could have been on one of the first couple of albums. So they've really kind of, they've nailed that sound. And I think a lot of people will think, what the hell are they doing when they listen to their song? But I love it.
Yeah. The only one I find a little odd is Desperado. Because we're so used to hearing Desperado sung the Alice Cooper way, particularly these days, where it's become more or less a ballad. To hear it with a really dark intent, it brings a whole new sinister edge to it somehow.
Yeah, I thought that was really clever what they did, because I was expecting them to do more of a faithful cover. And so when we got that, I'll admit, first time I heard it, I was like, ooh. And then I kind of, you know, you actually think of the lyrics and what the song's saying. It kind of makes sense. It was always a dark song anyway, but you're right. It kind of, over the years, it's almost become a ballad, doesn't it?
Yeah, Alice over the years has softened it into this sort of, almost like a tribute to the Doors. When
I've heard him say that. I've heard him say it's a tribute to Jim Morrison, which I always found weird, because I don't think he said that at the time. But you know, who am I to say?
Well, we never know what goes through their heads at the time when they're doing these albums. So the album was initially a Kickstarter campaign, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. There was a couple of reasons why we did that. We wanted to kind of draw attention to it, to kind of build up a little bit of excitement, and obviously to raise some money. Although we would have made it happen whether we got the money or not, if I'm honest, because it was a bit of a kind of labour of love for myself and my colleague Tim, who runs the label with me. But it certainly kind of brought a lot of excitement to the project, and kind of got people on board with the idea of the whole 50 years later, because we do want to make this a series. So releasing it 50 years to the day is kind of quite exciting to me.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been talking to the original drummer Neal Smith, and yeah, and he was really touched, actually, that people remember the original Alice Cooper albums.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, what a drummer! Funny enough, I think Neal Smith really shines on Killer.
Oh yeah, awesome.
You listen to Halo of Flies. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, to think a lot of that was done live in the studio as well, it's just unreal. But yeah, that's a real that's made me feel very happy hearing that. That's good.
And as you say, it's always Alice Cooper, isn't it? As a single entity, and a lot of particularly the younger audiences don't realise that it was Alice Cooper band, and they were the ones that really made Alice Cooper name. And sometimes I think they get kind of shoved by the wayside, as if to say, oh well, that was your backing band. They wrote a lot of the songs at the time, so I do think it's brilliant, especially if you go on and do the 50th anniversary of $1 Billion Babies would be incredible.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I always kind of toss between the two as my favorite Alice Cooper album, and it is the band which is my favorite period of Alice Cooper. And I think the past few years, I think there's been a little bit of a renaissance and a bit more of a kind of wider understanding that Alice Cooper was a band. I mean, I remember I went to see him in London, I don't know, I think 2017, and he had the original band come back on, obviously minus Glenn Buxton, for like an encore at the end, which was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said this project wasn't also about kind of bringing attention to this album, because it's kind of album that ever since I heard it, man, I'm only 40 years old. So like I was probably 13, 14 when I first heard it. And I've been telling people about it ever since, like, this is the best. The amount of people just never heard of it, of our generation. It's really disappointing. But yeah, I think that's one of the main driving factors for wanting to do this.
Yeah, it's available now on digital CD, and there's a vinyl as well, isn't there, for us vinyl enthusiasts?
So the 27th of November, it all comes out. That's the
yeah.
CD, vinyl, digital, it'll all come out on the 27th. And yeah, we can't wait for people to hear it. It's gonna be fantastic.
Is there any other Alice Cooper ones that? I mean, there's 3 bonus tracks on the CD in digital formats from 4. That's right, yeah, 4. Sorry, and taken from other Alice Cooper albums. Was there a big argument on which Alice Cooper songs would make the bonus tracks? Was there an argument of who wanted to do what? Not really. I mean, the brief that we gave the bands that we who agreed to be on it, the brief we gave them is anything from the band period. So anything from Pretty's For You up till Muscle of Love. We didn't want to incorporate any of the solo stuff. Not that we don't, have a big affection for his solo stuff, but I think this is a tribute to the Alice Cooper band,
So that was the only restriction we gave them, really.
And so they're brilliant. It's a nice touch because it is a short album, as many albums were back then because of vinyl limitations. And
I think
to add that extra tracks.
Those 70s albums, because you got everything you needed to say within about 41 minutes.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the reasons we didn't want to include the bonus tracks on the vinyl, because we didn't want to mess with that original format. I think for me, I would have been disappointed to do that, as much as it would have been nice to get them on the vinyl.
Well, we never know what the next one's going to be, do we? And you said you got plans to do more. Which one are you planning on doing next?
I could probably, you'll be the first to know, but we've just finished work on the second edition, which comes out in June next year. And that's going to be Ziggy Stardust by David Bowie.
Oh, yeah. So you must keep us informed on that one. I'd love to hear that.
Oh, you're going to love it. It's really eclectic. It's even more eclectic than Killer. And I can't tell you the one we're doing for 2023 for 1973, but that's going to be an absolute nightmare to do. But I can't wait to do it because it's colossal. And it's not. I don't think anyone will guess what it is either, which is really cool.
Great stuff. Well, we do wish you all the success with this. It deserves it for you. It deserves it for the bands involved, and the Alice Cooper band deserve this as well. But if new audience hear this and go, "Wow, I've got to get the Alice Cooper back catalogue," then it's a job well done, isn't it? Really. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel. It's been really good talking to you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.